Fantastic. Are we connected to all?
Yes.
All right, I'm starting. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I think we have connections from all over the world today. Welcome to the second session of the learning series on circular economy and private sector development. Today we will discuss circular economy and eco-industrial parks. For the participants who are joining for the first time, the link to the previous session and the program for the next session will be distributed via email at the end of this session. I also would like to invite the participants to use the Q&A panel on the right side of the screen to submit your questions and specifying the speaker if you have a specific question. Also, the material associated to this event will be distributed at the end of the session. And the link to the new release of the Eco-Industrial Park Framework 2.0 and the upcoming publication on circular economy and EIPs will be sent via email to all the participants by the end of this year. Today, we have an amazing set of presenters, including policymakers, practitioners, and global organizations. This second session of the learning series on global circular economy is hosted by the World Bank Group in partnership with GIZ and UNIDO. In this session, World Bank Group, UNIDO, and GIZ will present the second edition of the EIP framework. We will also learn from global leaders which are advancing the circularity models in EIPs, explore questions of economic viability, environmental impact, and scalability in our new normal. I have a personal note on this. I remember actually presenting the green zones, eco-industrial parks, maybe 10, 12 years ago in a conference. And it seemed far-fetched at the time to many of the participants. And it is really amazing to see that they are now being mainstreamed. And I personally don't think that there's any separate eco-industrial park framework going forward from now on. All industrial infrastructure, I think, will need to have variations of eco-industrialism as part of their DNA. In summary, eco-industrial parks are an effective approach to achieve circular economy and increase competitiveness of firms and industrial sectors, greening the supply chain and alleviating resource constraints. Waste and pollution through circular economy practices can actually lead to improved resource management, resource conservation, and reduce climate impacts, and of course pave the way for a more competitive industrial system. EIPs are also tools to enhance the circularity of our depletable resources at industrial parks by introducing new business models and habitual behavior change to alleviate dependence on those resources that consequently create a positive contribution to climate action. We will start our event with basically a presentation from Caroline, who is our first presenter. She is the Global Director of Trade, Investment and Competitiveness at the Finance, Competitiveness and Innovation Global Practice of the World Bank Group. Caroline was previously a Senior Fellow at the Peterson Institute of International Economics. She has also worked as a Chief Economist for the Middle East and North Africa region for the World Bank, after working for nearly a decade in the International Trade Unit of the Research Department. Caroline began her career in International Finance Division of the Federal Reserve Board and spent a year visiting the Research Department of IMF. She has published extensively in academic journals and is the author of a very interesting book, Rich People, Poor Countries, The Rise of Emerging Market Tycoons and Their Megafirms. She has a PhD in economics from the Columbia University. Caroline will highlight World Bank Group's strategy on mainstreaming the circular economy and more specifically our EIP program to support our developing country clients. Caroline?
Gökhan, for that kind introduction. First, I'd like to welcome everyone to the second session of the Circular Economy Learning Series focused on eco-industrial parks today. And we have over 900 registered participants in the series. So I think it's come off to a very good start showing the interest. I'm also very happy to welcome UNIDO and GIZ as co-organizers of this session. We've been working for over 7 years with these partners on eco-industrial parks and have developed a common vision. In this second session, as Gökhan mentioned, we'll explore the role of eco-industrial parks in the circular economy and how these targeted policy solutions can help promote the competitiveness of the parks and their tenant firms. So industrial parks are frequently used by countries as centers of excellence for business operations and as a way to pilot some targeted policies for industries. On their own, so just thinking about industrial parks, they can only be successful when they address a market failure. So this is one thing we've seen in extensive analysis and data gathering at the World Bank, that while many countries want to put these in and hope that they'll grow and in many cases export, they're not a solution for lagging regions. What they are is if there's a market failure, if getting a business license is an issue, if access to land is an issue, if getting electricity is an issue, you put these into a location where you can overcome that market failure, they can be quite successful. But they also need to be very well connected to the economy. And then moving to the concept of eco-industrial parks, this is really the next generation, and it provides a structured approach to policymakers and practitioners that want to develop industrial parks with the intention to mitigate negative economic, social, or environmental fallout and promote a more sustainable form of industrial growth. In addition to environmental and social benefits, these parks can offer competitiveness advantages. Of course, better use of resources is good business policy, since it reduces costs if you use less water or less energy, or you're able to share waste management and things like that. These parks offer an opportunity for companies to embark on the circular economy, with waste exchanges, as I mentioned, or improving the circularity of water. So the policy framework and proactive management, which we're going to talk about today, can help to encourage this behavior and ensure that the parks function as they're supposed to and are sustainable. And the World Bank is supporting various countries in implementing these eco-industrial parks and promoting the circular economy, including in Bangladesh, Vietnam, Turkey, China, Pakistan, and recently in Morocco. Let me just quickly mention an example in Bangladesh. And we're very proud today to have Mr. Paban Chowdhury here with us today. His vision for this new phase of private sector growth in Bangladesh will show us exactly how the EIP approach can be used to drive greener development. So we're really looking forward to working with him. Finally, I want to thank everyone for joining this session, especially those in East Asia, where I know it's late. And I look very forward to a lively discussion on this topic. Back to you, Gökhan.
For the excellent introduction. In this second session, we will have World Bank Group, GIZ, and UNIDO who are working together in the development of the framework to introduce the jointly developed EIP international framework, highlighting the circular economy principles embedded in the design of specific performance indicators. In that regard, we have Nilgün from UNIDO to discuss about EIPs and circularity, and then Mareike will introduce from GIZ, will introduce the general principles of the EIP framework, and Dario from the World Bank Group will talk about the competitiveness and main interventions in development of EIPs and EIP framework. Brief introductions to the three participants. Nilgün Taş, my compatriot, is the Deputy Director of the Department of Environment and Chief for the Industrial Resource Efficiency Division at UNIDO. She also leads UNIDO's cross-departmental team for circular economy. As a private sector development specialist with over 35 years of experience, Nilgün held various positions as Chief for Competitiveness, Business Environment, and Industrial Upgrading Unit, Chairperson of the Gender Mainstream Steering Committee, UNIDO representative in Vietnam at UNIDO, and Chief Senior Technical Advisor for various UNIDO, UNDP, and OECD projects since 1996. She holds an undergrad and grad degrees in engineering and a master's degree in business administration. And then we will have Mareike presenting. She is an advisor at the GIZ Competence Center for Environment in Germany, working mainly on the development of sustainable industrial areas. She is a tandem partner of the SIA working group, coordinating joint activities and advising member projects worldwide. Ms. Ball holds a master's degree in economics and governance. And finally, Dario Quaranta, who is a senior expert in the finance, competence, and innovation global practice at the bank group, will talk about the contribution to the design and implementation of global programs on eco-industrial parks. He has worked on resource efficiency, resilience, and circular economy. Dario brings more than 18 years of business experience in C-level and senior roles in multinational corporations. He has worked across industries, including energy, engineering, and construction, and he has led projects in Europe, MENA, and South Asia. Dario holds a master's degree in chemical engineering, corporate finance, and project management and financing. We will start with Nilgün in the presentation. Nilgün, would you like to go ahead, please?
Thank you, Gökhan. Thanks for the introductions. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. Today, our presentation, UNIDO, GIZ, and World Bank Group presentation on eco-industrial parks will have three takeaways. I will try to establish the link between circular economy and eco-industrial parks, while Mareike from GIZ will give you an overview of the framework that we have developed over so many, based on our joint work going back to 7 years ago. And then Dario will talk to you about enabling eco-industrial parks at national and park level. We thought this would be a good chapeau to what follows in the next panel. So before I talk about how we define circular economy, just let me talk to you about what I did today. I woke up, I had some tea at home, a little breakfast, I sat at the table, I wore my clothes, I'm wearing shoes now, I drove to the office, I used the road, I went under a bridge, I'm sitting in my office with lots of equipment, tables, chairs, I have a glass with me with the water in it. I am using a computer, and what might be seen as virtual, this WebEx, is being serviced from still servers somewhere in the world. I don't know. If I'm sick, I go to a doctor or a diagnosis center where they use some imaging technology, education, sports, even services like my dry cleaner uses goods, products. So our economy is made up of millions of products, whether they are small or large, whether they are a building and steel rebar in it or glass on the window, we are working with products. This is what a business sitting in an industrial park, this is how they look at it. This is what they produce. It's a product. So for us in UNIDO also, circular economy is an industrial economy. And it's very simple to understand. It returns products, parts, components, and materials into use several times, but it is based on some principles. which later translate into practices, that products are designed to last, value is maintained for as long as possible, generation of waste and pollution is minimized, and very importantly, renewable energy is used along value chains as much as possible. So about looking at the supply chain or value chain of products and improving what generally is called resource efficiency. Resources, of course, include fossils, which create the energy, but in addition to that, biomass, metals, and non-metallic minerals. So energy is a part of circular economy. What enables circular economy is innovation, stewardship, partnerships, and collaboration between the three main stakeholder groups who produce and consume these products. And these are the businesses, the governments who are enablers, and consumers, whether they are businesses or individuals, i.e. citizens, who need to understand the benefits of circular economy practices to support them, to create the demand. So as UNIDO, while some people, some other organizations use the word business models, because model is less understandable, we prefer to use the word business practices when we translate the principles into doable practices. For instance, reducing or replacing the product, like in a single-use plastic, or in the design phase, reducing the amount of materials used, eliminating or replacing hazardous chemicals, improving durability, reusability, upgradability, recyclability, increasing recycled content in products, and so ensuring that products use energy and other resources efficiently throughout their lifetime. We, as you are seeing in the graphic, we prefer to talk about end of a first life, because then all these practices can come into being if you treat everything has only a first lifetime, and afterwards they can be useful through they can be put into additional use. Maximizing resource efficiency in manufacturing is also critical, and optimizing or intensifying the use of products. Then the remanufacturing, regenerating biomass, recycling materials, and sometimes we are questioned, but we include waste to energy, because after you do everything else you can to give additional lifetimes to a product, it's better to try to extract energy from that product rather than putting it into the landfill. In any case, we still have to deal for a long time to come with waste. So putting this into perspective, these principles and practices into perspective within an industrial park, and particularly at an eco-industrial park. In an eco-industrial park, as Caroline said, we are working with successful parks. We are not trying to restructure, reform parks that are not doing well. It must be a viable park. And in that park, or for that park, there is a management entity. So the management entity in an eco-industrial park can provide circular economy services, for instance, R&D, maintenance, centralized waste collection, reuse facilities, recycling to the tenant companies. Please think of an eco-industrial park or an industrial park as a location, as if it's a little town, because it has thousands of people, perhaps hundreds of enterprises, and it's like a town. there is much talk about circular economy and regions and localities and localization. So in that respect, an eco-industrial park is a locality where you can try to exercise these, promote these practices. So EIPs also provide a testing ground for new enabling technologies and businesses for reuse and remanufacturing, and in the manufacturing to implement resource-efficient, cleaner production at the bottom, industrial synergies or industrial symbiosis between different companies within the park, common recycling facilities where you can create additional synergies with other firms, and even with the locality, the community, or the town or the city near a park, so that you could also engage in urban industrial symbiosis, including energy recovery from waste, for example, for heating and cooling districts. So we see eco-industrial parks as the breeding ground for circular economy practices, where there are opportunities to learn together and to benefit from synergies. And we see this in the 8 countries we are currently working with. We are working with 50 industrial parks, helping them transitioning thanks to our partnership with SECO of Switzerland. And we are talking about EIP being a breeding ground for circular economy practices based on that experience. With that, I thank you for your attention. And now I invite Marike to take up the second part of our presentation and talk about the framework. Thank you.
Thank you, Nilgün. Yeah, so I think you already heard a lot of benefits of the eco-industrial parks. It was already mentioned in the keynote and then by Nilgün, but there are many more, and I just will give insights into more of those benefits. For example, you have the reduced use of raw materials, water, energy, chemicals. You already heard that. And then you also have the minimized greenhouse gas emissions and also minimized release of pollutants, then reduced environmental, economic, and social risks. And then you also have an improved competitiveness and profitability of the whole park and also of the tenants within the park. And then the creation of good quality jobs, improved workers' health and safety, increased quality of life for communities as needs of communities and also employees are met. And then better access to new technologies and finances. And as you see that the negative impacts on the environment are reduced, and at the same time you have improved working conditions and also an increased economic performance of the park, UNIDO, World Bank, and also GIZ are promoting this eco-industrial park approach. And they partnered in 2017 or already before to develop this eco-industrial park framework. But in 2017, this was published. And with that eco-industrial park framework, we are trying to provide a common understanding of what is an eco-industrial park. And we are also trying to develop a standardized framework for the topic or for these eco-industrial parks. And currently, we are working on an update of this eco-industrial park framework. And this will probably be released in December 2020, so this year. And in this update of the framework, we are trying to increase the practicability of this framework, to fill some gaps, and also to integrate some experiences we made in the last 3 years. And then there's also the practitioner's handbook for eco-industrial parks. This was also developed by World Bank, UNIDO, GIZ, and also the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy of Korea. And I think, Dario will give you more insights into that later on in their presentation. And and you can access those 2 publications on the mentioned websites here. And the core of the framework is that economic aspects, social, environmental, and park management aspects are considered equally. So under those 4 categories, you find a lot of subtopics. For example, on the social, you find social management systems. You find the social infrastructure. On environment, water and waste management. On the park management, you find the park management services, the monitoring, planning and zoning. On the economic, you find employment generation or SME development. And as a baseline for this eco-industry park framework, there's the compliance with local and national regulations. But if this is lacking, or if you want to go beyond this compliance, we have for all of those 4 categories, we defined and also developed prerequisites as basic requirements, so which you can then answer by yes or no if it's there in the park. And then you have performance indicators, where you can monitor expected performance levels. And to give you an example of this, how this can look like and how this is in the eco-industry park framework, I know the slide is quite full, so please don't start to read through it. I will just give you an example on the environment. You have as a topic waste, and then as a subtopic of waste, we have the resource conservation. And then the prerequisite, so basic requirement, will be that obeying the principles of circular economy is part of the park's code of conduct. So this can be answered by yes or no. And if it's answered by yes, then you can look into the performance. And the performance indicator on resource conservation would be the proportion of manufacturing firms adopting circular economy practices. This should be 20% of tenant firms which are participating in the CE or circular economy practices. On the social, we have an example on social management system. So this is a prerequisite which can be answered by yes or no. So dedicated person exists to plan, manage, and enforce social quality standards. And then a subtopic or a part of the social management system is the occupational health and safety management system. And here you can also monitor the performance. If you are looking at the proportion of all firms in the park which have a well-functioning occupational health and safety system in place. And this should be 75% of all firms in the park. And so this is just an example. So you find a lot of those indicators and also prerequisites in the framework if you have a look at it. And this was just to explain you how to read it. And I think I'm done with that theoretical part, and I would like to hand over to Daria. Thanks for your attention also from my side, and please continue, Dario.
Thank you, Mareike. So in this subsession, we are going to discuss about the implementation. After we have understood the clear nexus between circular economy and EIP, and we have analyzed the EIP framework. So in this case, we are trying to explain how this implementation will come. So I prepared this slide in which we have split it into two. At national level, I want to focus on this part for the time being. So we have identified four main forces or enablers that affect the implementation of the EIP. So these forces are stakeholder engagement, rules and regulation, financing mechanism, and institutional capacity. I've listed here some of the barriers associated with those enablers. For financing mechanism, we have insufficient financial returns on sustainable investment. So some of the actions that can be implemented are to support R&D, innovation, or new technology to reduce capital operational costs. What we have done in Bangladesh, for example, is we have supported BESA, that is the Bangladesh Economic Zone Authority, to establish a grant mechanism to sustain investment in more efficient equipment and machinery for companies that are establishing new production facilities in economic zones. The purpose is to incentivize the decarbonization of the industrial zone. So for what concerns the rules and regulation, I've highlighted here the lack of appropriate regulations. So some of the main actions that can be implemented in this instance are the adoption of new policies to support the establishment of new business models, or to allow the exchange of material among tenant firms and sustain the creation of industrial partnership, including a PPP. So in Vietnam, what we have done is that the exchange of waste and byproduct was forbidden among tenant firms in economic zones. This would have hindered the development of industrial symbiosis. Therefore, we supported local authorities to include the modification of the law on waste management in their roadmap for the development of a national EIP program. For what concerns stakeholders' engagement, I've highlighted here the lack of awareness and information sharing. The most effective action that can be taken is to create consensus towards the EIP program, is to map the stakeholders, identify those that can have higher impact on the implementation of the program, and arrange events, workshops, and seminars to foster their engagement. I want to bring here to your attention the example of Pakistan. In Punjab, the industry department has developed a new platform. It's a digital platform for the identification of the sites for the establishment of new industrial parks. And this platform works based on the availability of infrastructure, the connection to logistic hubs, environmental and social aspects, and so forth. The platform has not yet used systemically. It's a valid tool that can embed the EIP criteria, but requires competencies and skill, and above all, the involvement of all the other ministry and agencies to mainstream it. So even if the tool is valid, without information sharing and awareness, it loses its effectiveness. So stakeholder engagement is a key process for the success of any initiatives, including the EIP framework. For institutional capacity, I've highlighted here the limited enforcement of existing or new regulations. What we have seen in many countries that we have discovered that there are stringent laws, for example, on wastewater treatment, but the environmental agency authority is not able to enforce the regulation because of lack of human or financial resources. In the development of the EIP program, the improvement of the enforcement capacity is always a very crucial and important aspect to consider. But how do we understand where the gaps are? So we focus now on the second part of this slide. We need to refer to the fact that when we support the government in the implementation of the EIP framework, we have to pilot it in some industrial parks. So in Vietnam, we assess it 2 zones. In Turkey, more than 18. In Bangladesh, we are piloting it in 2 zones. Those are public and private. What we need to understand is how the EIP framework responds to the increase of competitiveness of the industrial parks or economic zones in the country. If we look at the selection of the zone from the perspective of the investors, 2 of the main factors behind the decision to invest are the environmental compliance, and this is more associated to reputational risk, and the high quality of services and low fees, and this is economic analysis of cost benefits. The EIP program at park level tries to respond to these needs by supporting park operators in implementing the following strategies. One can be invest in smart and efficient common infrastructure, so the capital cost should be an offset with innovative financing arrangement. We have seen that this is one of the enablers. Then we have the shift from real estate operator to a more complex service provider, and this means diversifying the service offers such as utilities, specialized HR services, logistics, procurement of general services, and so on. It will increase operational costs from one side, but it also diversifies the revenues and creates more specialized jobs. In the end, we have also to support industrial symbiosis networks. So the lack of trust among firms is a great barrier, and Professor Chirtlo from Yale will discuss about it. Park operators require to take new roles such as business facilitator or matchmaker to become also an investor sometimes. And we have the Ulsan EIP that will be in South Korea that will be described by Dr. An in the following section. So the piloting of the EIP framework at the park level provides the most important elements to identify the gaps in the 4 enabling forces, and it's one of the core activities to design an effective roadmap at national level to implement the reforms required to establish the national EIP program. So if we move very fastly to the other 2 slides, In these slides, we have highlighted the systemic approach that is detailed in the EIP protection handbook that has been written in coordination with the GIZ and UNITO, and it describes step by step the approach in the implementation of the EIP framework at PAC level and at national level. So at national level, there are only 4 steps that are engagement of stakeholders, diagnostic, development of a national roadmap, and launching, monitoring, and evaluating of the program. At PAC level, we have 4 steps, that is assessment and upgrade of the service and infrastructure, the establishment of a EIP and management unit, the performing of audits, and the reporting and marketing of successful cases. So this is well detailed into the handbook that I invite to take in consideration for understanding a little bit better the process. And now I want just to provide you with some examples of how we have implemented some of these EIP program in terms of investment that have been generated. So at PAC level, we have stimulated the adoption of renewable energy, such as floating solar, that is very innovative. Then we have energy, water, and material recovery that includes, for example, the reuse of treated wastewater, the generation of biogas from waste, and industrial symbiosis networks. And it's very important to consider that there is also a digitalization process in which we have sharing platform for the material exchange and for service among the tenant firms. So I finish here with my presentation, with part of the presentation, and I want to thank Nilgun and Mareike for the intervention, and also all the participants for the attention for this specific part. And I give the floor to you, Gökhan, to go to the panelist session.
Thank you, Nilgun. Thank you, Mareike, and thank you, Dario. I think it was fantastic to see how our 3 organizations have come together to work jointly on a very important topic, circular economy and eco-industrial parks. That is going to be an integral part of private sector development going into the future to address challenges that we'll be facing. And actually in a competitive and productive fashion. And the second thing is I actually really like the fact that the framework also looks at, as I always suggest, the ecosystem in itself, not just policies, laws, regulations, but also financing mechanisms, different types of policies, stakeholders, a number of ecosystem elements that needs to come together to develop viable and sustainable initiatives. In this panel, we are going to actually, again, talk to a number of really distinguished guests and who are actually on the foresight of implementing circular economy initiatives in their industrial parks. This panel discussion brings together 4 different perspectives on circular economy. Mr. Pavan, who is the chairman of BEZA, Bangladesh Economic Zones Authority, will provide insights from a developer authority perspective in terms of their motivations and challenges to build a circular, sustainable, and competitive economic zone regime in Bangladesh. Professor Chertow from Yale will talk about industrial symbiosis and competitiveness and how economic zone management can influence the thriving industrial partnerships among tenant firms. Professor Utikal from Höchst Industrial Park in Germany will explain the opportunities to shift the business model of a park operator from a real estate development perspective to a service provider focusing on sustainability and circularity. And Dr. An from KCPC will provide technical details on the importance of investing in innovation to support transformation in economic zones from a linear to a circular economy perspective. I'll do little introductions of our guests here, then I actually have specific questions to them depending on their perspective and background. Briefly, Mr. Chaudhry is the secretary to the government, currently acting as the executive chairman of Bangladesh Economic Zones Authority in Bangladesh. He's a seasoned bureaucrat who has served in various capacities throughout his 3.5 decades of long career. Soon after assuming his role in 2004, he embarked on an ambitious journey of setting up 100 economic zones across the country, which is expected to generate 10 million direct and indirect jobs and bring additional exports and production to the tune of $40 billion in Bangladesh. And this is one of Bangladesh's basically premier growth initiatives. Under his leadership, the biggest industrial city, Pampabanggo Sheikh Mujib Shilampagar, BSMSN, as we actually define jointly, of around 13,000 hectares is taking its shape. And he is active in engaging and formulating the regulatory, infrastructural and industrial policies and frameworks to promote establishment of this initiative as well as other economic zones in the country. He has an MBA from the Institute of Business and Administration in Dhaka. He has joined in the Bangladesh Civil Service in 1986, and he has served in Bangladeshi government in various capacities, both at home and abroad. And one of the very interesting things is we have been working very closely with the Bangladeshi government during the last decade and a half on economic zones initiatives, and we actually have a very large lending operation of 500 million or so that was recently approved at the board to support the development of the BSMSN industrial area that I just mentioned. Marian Chetro is a professor of industrial environmental management at the Yale School of Environment and the director of the Center for Industrial Ecology. She is also appointed at the Yale School of Management and the National University of Singapore. Her research and teaching focuses on industrial ecology, business and environment issues, circular economy, waste management, and urban sustainability. In 2019, she received the highest recognition of the International Society for Industrial Ecology, its Society Prize, for her outstanding contributions to her field. Prior to Yale, Professor Chetro spent 10 years in environmental business and state and local governments, including serving as the president of a bonding authority that built $1 billion investment in waste infrastructure. She served as an advisor to the Center of Energy Efficiency and Sustainability at the Train Technologies, the board of TerraCycle US Inc., and the board of Alliance for Research in Corporate Sustainability. Dr. Hannes Utikal is the head of the Center for Industry and Sustainability at Provades Hochschule, a University of Applied Sciences based at the Industrial Park Frankfurt Works. This park has a history of more than 160 years of industrial production. It's amazing and applies different principles of the circular economy. As part of his research and academic teaching activities, Hannes focuses on the management specifics of companies in the chemical industry. He is the editor-in-chief of the Open Access Journal of Business Chemistry, the academic journal for management issues in the chemical industry. And he studied business administration at the Cologne University, German, HEC in Paris, and the Penn State University, and received his PhD in Cologne University. Finally, Dr. Sanjun is a project manager at the KNTTC in Korea, Institute of Industrial Technology. He holds a BS, MS, and PhD in mechanical engineering from Hanyang University in Korea, and has held postdoctoral positions in chemical engineering department at the Carnegie Mellon University in the US. He was appointed research professor at the Mechanical Engineering Technology Certificate at the Hanyang University, and has several years of experience in supporting policy planning and project implementation for the cleaner project production for Korean SMEs. His main focus that is actually part of this discussion is the local economic innovation project, which supports the cleaner production technologies of local SMEs for minimizing pollution and energy use. And he is now expanding this project into other Asian developing countries. Without much basically break, I wanted to basically ask a few questions to each of our participants to talk about their experiences. And I'll start with Mr. Paban. I have two interlinked questions, Paban. The first one is, what was the main motivation to adopt a more sustainable framework for the development of the first green and resilient economic zone in Bangladesh? What was the main motivation and how did you calculate it? And my second question is, what were the main challenges that you have faced in shifting the mindset of the stakeholders from public and the private sector towards a more circular economy approach? Paban?
Thank you, Gokhan. Very good morning, good evening, and a good afternoon to the participants who are participating from across the globe. I would like to express my gratitude to World Bank Group, GIZ, and UNIDO for jointly organizing today's learning series on circular economy and private sector development. I believe today's theme of this panel discussion will be focused on the status and challenges of implementing EIP framework into the green revolution of our industrial sector through circular economic practices. What actually motivated us in going for a more sustainable framework for the development of the first green and resilient economic zone in Bangladesh? To be very frank, the biggest one in this region, on about 13,000 hectares of land that we are establishing mainly in Chittagong and in adjoining two more districts. Bangladesh economy is experiencing a robust growth at the rate of above 6% for the last 12 years on an average. Even during the year of pandemic, Bangladesh economy grew over 5.2%. And the factors that motivated us to develop green and resilient economic zones are unplanned industrialization, depletion of our natural resources, especially the sources of water, and degradation of our environment quality in consequence of this haphazard development, threat to public health, unplanned urbanization and industrialization resulted in serious congestion in the main two cities, namely Dhaka and Chittagong. Motivated us to do something extraordinary that can address all these issues in a more efficient and sustainable manner, which can save our beautiful Bangladesh from adverse effects of rapid industrialization and utilizing the opportunity of offering a better and decent life to the community. To catch up the neighbors and competitors in line with the economic development, green economic zones can be an effective approach to achieve circular economy and increase competitiveness of farms. Greening the supply chain and elevating resource constraints, minimizing waste disposal and pollution can lead to improved resource management. BESA is to introduce circular economy, especially in BSMSM, in its and other zones, encouraging symbiotic industries and achieving more cost-efficient production process, boosting competitiveness for the tenants. Already, a large number of water and energy-intensive industries are exploring the opportunities of efficient, cleaner production technologies at their development stage in our economic zones. BESA is keen to help, assist, and incentivize these industries for setting up these green infrastructures with cogeneration facilities and energy-efficient designs such as green buildings, waste heat recovery, generators, preheated boilers, heat exchangers with insulated steam network, etc. BESA's success in attracting globally reputed developers like Sumitomo Corporation, Adani Ports and SEZ Limited, Suzis Corporation, China Harbour and Engineering Corporation, prompted in innovating an environment where all the international investors will feel comfortable in a compliance environment. We felt the urge of making this investment process sustainably sustainable. And about the challenges that we have faced, dear friends and colleagues, the challenges that we have faced to the roadmap of establishing EIPs in Bangladesh are large. Still, we are facing challenging challenges, though we overcome a lot. In every stage of our journey to establishing economic zones in Bangladesh, we faced numerous difficulties, but adopting diversified and situation-demand strategy, we overcome them. And now it seems dream comes true. The main complications mostly related with the local power structure, landowners, land grabbers, legacy of colonial bureaucratic process, etc. We tackle them case by case, and definitely we can say that in a more unconventional way. We develop partnership with the people who lived in the government land, and we acquired. As for example, we paid compensation even to those people who had no legal right to get money. And not only that, in addition to making compensation to them, we are creating housing facilities for the people who used to live generally on the roadsides. We made it possible in different ways. Like these, there are lots of examples. We keep provisions for skill development and training for the local people so that they can get employed in the EZ industries. In this way, we solve different problems. Implementation agencies need a simple and transparent process of designing projects. It relates to empowerment and development of capacity for the investment promotion agencies in the countries like Bangladesh. We try to create a conducive environment where officers could design their own strategy, plan their own projects, develop their projects, and to establish an authority that is accountable to the general people and their stakeholders. We showed zero tolerance in case of corruption, which not only strengthened our image, position, but also made a positive change in the mindset of all the stakeholders involved in the process of including the foreign investors. When both local and foreign renowned firms ensure their investment, it helps to overcome certain challenges automatically. Confirmation of about $19 billion of industries at the BSMS and Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujib Shilpanagar is a simple manifestation of trust that we enjoy among the investors. Thank you very much.
It's really interesting to see the basically complex challenges you have faced. You know, I think as part of that ecosystem, there are challenges actually on each side of that framework that you actually were able to synergize and synthesize and coordinate across different institutions for implementation. And I think developing and designing that institutional coalitions that you have done are critical in implementation of these frameworks. Thank you. And I remember actually probably a year and a half ago discussing these issues in your boardroom there. Thank you again. And
thank you very much.
Second guest is Marianne. Marianne, I'll start with one question and then maybe follow up with another. Based on your practical and research experience, what do you think are the key enablers for park management to foster industrial symbiosis in industrial parks?
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here, and I'm especially pleased to find out what the World Bank has done and how far these ideas have spread and how they've matured. I have to say that I've been looking at eco-industrial parks and industrial symbiosis since 1996. Not that I'm old or anything, but I do want to say that President Bill Clinton started an EIP, Eco-Industrial Park Initiative, in 1996, and that's how I got involved. In 2000, I wrote my first big article. You know, in academic world, our metrics are different from economic development numbers and so forth. We count our citations. How many times did someone put my article in their article? And this is my most successful article, looking at the beginnings of industrial symbiosis in a practical way as well. So what I wanted to do is share some of these stories with you and some of the theories with you, but there are more on the social side, that are more about the community aspects and the barriers and enablers in that light. So when I first translated or actually defined industrial symbiosis, I think the key words I want to pass on to you are that I spoke about traditionally separate industries but in a collective approach to competitive advantage. And so I've always thought of this as a business thing, and that the competitive advantage and the collective are both important. Usually in business, we study single companies or companies within industries and industries. Now we have to look across industries, and we have to see how we can mingle them and take advantage of the various materials, energy, water that may be available for additional gain. So the other part about industrial symbiosis is that it does involve physical resource sharing. So one company's waste does become another company's feedstock in many ways. And there's an informational part of that that's important, as well as the actual physical exchanges. So what I'm looking at now, we call dynamics of industrial symbiosis. And what I mean by that is that we finally just acknowledge that these EIPs and industrial symbiosis projects within them or around them are ever changing. It's an ongoing process. It's going to keep changing. And even if it started in one way, it may well be managed 10 years later in a different way. And these are all positive things that we need to identify. The other important thing is the social embeddedness element here. The view that economic activities are embedded in social relationships, and therefore the economic activities are strongly influenced by these social relationships. And so that's another key starting point for me. I noticed that someone in the Q&A had asked about Michael Porter, and that is something that I have touched a little bit on, since he also studied clusters, but Porter tended to study clusters of, for example, furniture or wine country. There was one dominant industry, and then he was looking at all the enablers of that. Here in industrial symbiosis, we really do value the diversity of materials, not just a single cluster having to do with a single topic, but how is it that we can mingle the power plant with the pharmaceutical company and still find common exchanges. But Porter also identified, and this is a lesson that I learned from him in the studies of his clusters, that there was almost always a reason to put a cluster somewhere. You know, there was always some kind of a tradition for textiles in North Carolina and so forth. And I have observed the same thing with industrial symbiosis. One park we've studied a great deal is in China, in Shenzhen, the TEDA project. And now it's one of the largest projects in the world for the eco-industrial park. But it started out as a salt flat, you know, and I have the photos to back this up. It was really a salt mine. And from there became the further development, and now we see what we have. Similarly, one other Chinese park in Guangxi is the Guitang Group, and they started out to make sugar. That's the sugar region of China. And so back in the 50s, they created a sugar operation, and then to use the byproduct of the sugar, they made molasses. Well, the whole footprint of this park has changed, and more opportunities have been found for symbiosis. So, for example, the fiber part of the sugar cane is now processed into paper, and the paper is very much needed in that area. And economically, it's been a boon because, you know, sugar is often regulated in different ways, and having a separate product like paper, it has enabled them to also increase their economic stability. Now they also have other products that have grown on to the original sugar plant for alcohol and alkali and recovering lots of other products. We see similar things in the UK with British sugar, and so I think there's a lot of validity to these concepts. What are some of these dynamics that we're studying? Well, we see that some projects, and these are smaller, not as big as Bangladesh. It sounds exciting. I'd love to see it. But they have, they're more self-organized. Something happened. I started exchanging materials with you because it was economically beneficial for me not to have transportation and not have to bring something in from far away. And so that's a very interesting, because these are under the radar. I say they're everywhere, that where people just found economic reasons to work with one another, And now we can develop that and do the larger plans that we see in the EIPs, and even use a facilitated model where there's really an orchestrator of the larger park. And one of these, the National Industrial Symbiosis Program in the UK, has been now expanding around the world. So we see a great value for this kind of orchestration, the sort of purposeful actions to recruit members and create the park and increase its value in that way. So similarly, in India, we've seen a very interesting park we studied to death, I think. No, it's still there. And the facilitator for that project, even though there are some larger companies represented in the park of about 50 companies, the facilitator was actually a guy who fixed the fenders on motorcycles. He had a tiny little office, and every Monday he would put on the internet, say, we have these byproducts, and we have this opportunity for water exchange, and everyone got to know him, and the social part was very important in that part. So I'd like to also say something about other experiences that we've had where we often see, and this is really an enabler, I think, people get the economics right away, but undercount the environmental benefits that can accompany the economic benefits. So originally in the famous Denmark example of Kalundborg, the pharmaceutical companies there were able to create an organic product from making yeast and so forth and providing that to farmers. And after 10 years, the farmers said, wow, we really are dependent on this now. It's like it's an important soil amendment for us. We're going to pay you and not just take this off your, off your problem list. And so I think these economic benefits mingle so well with the environmental benefits and should always be considered at the appropriate time. You have to get it going. I'm very respectful of how hard it is to get financial enterprises running. I don't know how much more time I have, but I'd like to just wrap up with the idea about community and trust. When we really look at lubricants, what is it that can drive an industrial symbiosis? Trust is really quite important. We studied this at Yale. We looked at the notion of social capital, and does the fact that managers in a cluster know each other increase the ability to do industrial symbiosis? And we did a complete formal social network analysis of a large pharma cluster in the Caribbean, and we tested the expression, the willingness to do business with. And it turned out that if the companies that were willing to do business with, that we interviewed, and the managers who were willing to do business with, that's where we found these network results that were supportive of the role of trust in industrial symbiosis. So let me wrap up and say that I also have some experience in South Korea. We said to our colleagues there, they've also had a phenomenal national program that you can never just do a top-down program, but there's always some level of bottom-up activity that has to support the park. And that's just logical. We're people. One of our earlier speakers said that this is like a town. And so you smile at the people in your town. You get to know the people in your town. In some cases, your kids play soccer together, or shall I say football together, and from there can grow relationships as well. So I wanted to highlight that these are significant and I think important aspects and social type elements of industrial symbiosis and eco-industrial parks that we don't want to lose out on.
Thank you very much, Marianne. That's fantastic, actually. So I appreciate a few of the points you raised, but I think one of the things I need to mention is I got no basically references to my first presentation on the bank group on eco-industrial parks. That sounds unfair. But it's also amazing to see what you mentioned, including the US, that a lot of the industrial park zones have actually been innovators for decades on different areas, including on eco-industrial initiatives, because it makes sense from a business point of view. And that viability and business point of view actually is really important in moving forward these initiatives. Another thing that you mentioned actually is dear to the heart, is basically sense of community and building the right partnerships, coalitions to move forward these initiatives effectively. And on the other one, actually related to the question on Michael's book, basically I am one of those people in the mid-90s who started on working on competitiveness, looking at the book, and I think it may be time to do an update of it, looking at from an eco-industrial side to see what has been those opportunities and challenges to actually look at and this framework from a different angle or a combined angle, and maybe a better one. Thank you, Maria. And with that, I will move basically the conversation to Hannes, who is actually on the real practical side as a developer manager of an industrial park. And Hannes, I want to see if you can actually talk about what do you think are the main business models applied in your industrial parks from different perspectives, and how could actually an eco-industrial park framework support the shift of industrial parks from real estate development initiatives to actively driving eco-industrial initiatives, and what would be those enabling factors in your experience from a private sector point of view?
Thank you very much. So I'm happy to share the experiences from the industrial park Frankfurt Höchst, a chemical industrial park founded 160 years ago. There was, I think, until 25 years ago, one of the largest or the largest chemical company of the world, the Höchst Corporation. But then there was the separation into different companies like Sanofi, Clariant, and Celanese, and now we've got a cluster or industrial park with 90 companies on site, and they are managed by one company, Infrastructure Höchst. They're responsible for managing the site, for producing the energy that is needed, for doing all the waste and water management and the community management as well. In terms of activities, this industrial park has 22,000 employees going there every day, not only every year, but every day. And the industrial park operator has revenues of around 1 billion euros. The activities you can find there in terms of the circular economy are typically that you've got the joint facilities for energy management. So there's one joint energy production unit for the whole park, where there's, for instance, waste treatment. There is as well trading electricity with the total German infrastructure as well. So the park is on the one hand autark in terms of producing on its own, but as if you've got a lot of electricity in the national grid, then the park can reduce its own production of electricity and buy or sell the electricity, thereby working with the national grid of electricity, and this is another profit driver for the park. So there is one specific approach for energy, electricity, and heat management for all 90 companies on site. There is one, and that's where I'm part of. There are education activities on the site as well. Provades at the University of Applied Sciences, but as well vocational training. There are sustainability and circularity aspects are part as well of the curriculum. We as Provades, we are part of different European initiatives like EIT Climate Kick or EIT Manufacturing, where we get additional academic insight on how to optimize park activities. We are engaging in specific innovation projects where we optimize resource flows. For instance, there's one project where we try to use CO2 as a resource for producing waxes, for instance. There's one project where hydrogen that is generated as a byproduct and within the chemical process is used for fueling the local public transportation train. There is a project focusing on phosphorus recycling, where phosphorus from waste is used for creating fertilizers, for instance. So you can find on different levels activities on how to foster those circular economy practices that you described beforehand. It's on the physical resource dimension. It's as well on the governance aspect that, for instance, this University of Applied Sciences manages relations to other academic institutions or to the broader neighborhoods. And the aspect of trust that was mentioned before is fostered as well by different initiatives. There's on the one hand the industrial park manager being responsible for creating a lot of events and activities for mixing people from different companies on site. For our activities, we funded a formal cluster for the chemical industry in the Rhine-Main region in Frankfurt as well, where we said that after the separation of the large corporation, Höchst Corporation, we still need more social glue in order to foster the collaboration across companies. Once the former colleagues will go to retirement, we still need to have the social glue in order to make sure that they will collaborate. So there are really a lot of different initiatives to make sure that circular aspects are integrated into the business activity. When does it work? It does only work if the different participants see benefits, economic benefits in doing so. These benefits can stem directly from reducing costs for electricity or resources. Those can stem indirectly from subsidies, but all different actors, they need to have an economic benefit, otherwise they will not really invest too much time in it. That's to a certain degree sad, but that's on the other hand, it's of course the way that you have to take into account how to make sure that it will be really have an impact on the ground. How can the industrial park have the influence as an enabler? That was the second part of your question. In Frankfurt, we've got this park manager, and they are, this company, Infosys Höchst, is owned by the largest tenants. So for instance, Sanofi and Celanese, they do own the management company on site. And the different companies there on site, they all have to make sure that they are competitive on a global level. So for instance, if Celanese in Texas will decide where to have the next production plant, the local actor in Frankfurt wants to make sure that he's got the best KPIs. If local regional activities help him to increase his company internal competitive position, then he will help foster, for instance, circular economy ideas. If it doesn't help him in order to improve his own competitiveness, then he will stop investing in that activity. So having this kind of governance structure where the major tenants have on the other hand as well a management structure for managing the regional activities is to a certain degree a framework for success. That's all from my side.
Fantastic. Thank you, Hannes. This is actually really interesting because when I look at what you're describing, the park has not really just focused on itself, but actually has been a catalyst for the broader neighborhood, as you discussed, to actually expand into and identify viable opportunities for circular economy. That's actually very interesting. And I think Germany has been one of the leaders in basically not just looking at the parks, but integrating in the broader community and even across the nation in different ways. That's actually, I think, a very important step we need to think about on how can we think about developing EIPs in a fashion where they influence and work and integrate with the broader communities. And there are, I think, a lot of lessons learned from actual initiatives like yours in this arena. Thank you. It was really interesting, actually. So the next person is Sang-Jun talking about the Korean experience. Sang-Jun, I have, again, a couple questions. Maybe I'll go for both of them at the same time. What has been the most successful and representative Korean eco-industrial park model so far? And what has been your technical approach and the government approach and policy for circular economy in the Korean industrial parks? These are integrated into each, but I think they are very relevant in terms of development of the approach and application across eco-industrial parks with lessons learned.
Okay, thank you for that, Gokhan. First thing is that, there is a famous EIP business model in Korea known as Steam Highway Network, which is connecting companies with steam pipelines. And once the steam pipeline is installed in Ulsan area in 2008, the pipeline is still expanding in that region until now. And this model is spreading out to other possible areas in Korea as well. This slide shows the business case in Ulsan Mipo National Industrial Park in Yongyeon area in Ulsan City. This industrial park is specified with the petrochemical industry, and there are 15 companies and 2 incinerators running in this area. They consume a lot of steam energy in the petrochemical manufacturing process. At the beginning, it starts from a waste heat of incineration plant which treats residential waste in Ulsan area to a neighboring petrochemical company, Hyosung, during the first stage of a Korean EIP program. Yes, okay. At the beginning, it starts. Okay. At the beginning, it starts from waste heat of incineration plant. Yeah, and it was really successful for both sides, Hyosung and Ulsan City, because after investing $2.5 million each side, they have saved almost $10 million every year from the waste heat energy. This is not only a temporary profit, but also a sustainable profit over 12 years until now. From this big success, neighboring companies learned about these ideas, and also they found their waste heat source from the manufacturing process. Extra boiling system or low pressure of steam to use is mainly utilized. In that petrochemical process, some specific pressure of steam is used, and then some steam which is lowered to use anymore is wasted usually, because there is no other use in that factory. But they connected each other, installing steam pipeline from a company who has waste heat to another company who needs a cheaper energy source. After the construction of the steam highway in most of this whole area, some companies such as SK Chemical at the very left side of this the company, SK Chemical. Yes, using this steam highway, even though they are not neighboring enough each other to connect the pipeline without the steam highway to with this the coal company. Mm-hmm. And in this area, the networks are still expanding up to our current 6th stage of this steam highway project. When new company comes in this area, more steam can be supplied with enlarging its steam capacity from the incineration plant. From this increasing supply, in recent time, industrial water is also needed to generate steam. So, could you pass this the page, Dario? Could you the page down of this slide, please? I cannot control right now. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So, wastewater treatment plant is also participated in this project to supply the industrial water in 2018. Before this project, the wastewater treatment plant treated the wastewater into minimal water quality for emission within the law. But this time, they produce the value-added industrial quality water to make steam. Now, this area has a highly developed pipeline network consist of water resource and steam energy all together. Until now, total benefit is $49.7 million per year in revenue from $96.3 million investment, and total energy saving is 104,000 ton of oil equivalent per year. And second question was what is new technology approach and the governmental policy? Dario, could you the page down? In terms of managing the manufacturing factory, the first step is always the monitoring the factory. What kind of the material they use, how much energy they consume, and also we are usually monitoring their waste to control the environmental impact. In general, we are monitoring total energy use such as electricity, oil, gas from every single factory. And we are also monitoring emission of waste. This method is the conventional and basic management system. In South Korea, we have started to upgrade this system, adopting smart factory technology with governmental policy since 2015. We are converting the conventional factory into a smart factory up to 30,000 by 2025. This slide shows the concept of smart factory. We monitor most of the process from the IoT sensors and then analyze and control. Now we can optimize the manufacturing factory in the individual process level from various IoT sensors. Factory energy management system FEMS is mainly focused on the smart factory. But still, we say this is only a linear economy. From the pandemic situation, Korean government has just started Digital New Deal and Green New Deal policy this year. Government designated the 7 target industry park to establish a smart green industrial park. Dario, could you the page down, final page, please? Okay, thank you. This is the concept of a smart green industrial park in Korea right now. Finally, we can say the circular economy from a factory level through process level and again to park level. In this new project, Korean representative telephone companies will participate to collect data and analyze. Korean telephone companies start to expand their business to managing factories based on their data management platform with big data and AI technologies. This smart green industrial park includes ESS and demand response, photovoltaic generation power plant, fuel cell, microgrid system through the smart energy platform to be established in this project. But still, there are some limitations to optimize this industrial park in the aspect of circular economy. Most of the sensors are focused on not material use, but energy use only. Therefore, the material symbiosis will be limited from this real-time IoT sensor-based development system. So KNCPC is developing a new platform system to find industrial symbiosis potentials based on EIP business model with industrial open data. Even though this data is not a real-time source, it can be used to find EIP business potential. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sangyu. And this is actually very good presentation, and it actually shows, similar to Germany, how tedious, planned, and systematic Korea has approached the topic as part of its overarching green economy leadership initiative. It's very interesting to see the detailed work to identify the opportunities and utilize them through the EIP framework, but also do it in a fashion where it expands to, as earlier mentioned, to neighborhoods and to country in itself by replicating the successful models. That's very interesting, basically a model that we can utilize and learn from in implementing in other countries. Thank you again. Now, actually, I want to ask a question to one of our participants, Sinem Demir, who is one of our bank group leaders in designing and implementing advisory projects on eco-industrial parks, green economy. Sinem and I and the team has worked significantly during the last few years on this topic in Turkey. And I want to ask actually Sinem if she could come in and talk about the Turkish experience as another country that has started implementing this framework and has started seeing results as an example to our audience. And in doing that, Sinem, could you also please talk about what were the key issues you have faced, what type of sectors and groups of companies we may have looked at? Does that make a difference in basically implementing these frameworks? Because those questions are also coming up among the many questions we have received during the event from YouTube, WebEx, or other online resources. Sinem?
Gökhan, I think the main success factor of an eco-industrial park program in a country is really tie the program in national strategies and policies. In Turkey, the National Climate Change Action Plan targets a reduction of energy consumption by 20% by 2023 when we developed this program. And also, while working with Ministry of Industry and Technology, the ministry had ambitious targets to increase productivity of manufacturing sector and efficiency. And in Turkey, there are more than 300 industrial zones operating, and there is a good sectoral diversity in these industrial parks. And to support industrial productivity and drive sustainability agenda, as World Bank Group, we use eco-industrial park as a tool. And of course, it is very important to have an engagement from the firms and industrial park to initiate such program. Because an eco-industrial park program, first of all, requires to understand the current stance of industrial park and the tenant companies operating in these parks. And while starting the engagement level from our counterpart, Ministry of Industry and Technology, was very high, as well as from industrial parks, we saw the willingness to join in this program. And we have selected 4 industrial parks, and we started to work with them and their firms. And while selecting these industrial parks, the second important issue is to select some parks that presents the country's sectoral diversity. And this sectoral diversity requires to select some industrial parks, some firms which are energy intensive or water intensive, as well as the diversity in the park is very important to facilitate industrial symbiosis across different firms. And while doing this on-site diagnostic, we also look into some regulatory barriers, financing tools, and we have developed some business cases. Those are replicable to other industrial parks or other firms by means of resource efficiency, cleaner production, industry symbiosis, or green infrastructure development. And afterwards, we made a gap analysis against our international eco-industrial framework, and we identified the regulatory barriers or the opportunities to be improved. And by this way, we fine-tuned the eco-industrial park criteria set. You remember the criteria groups from Mareike's presentation. She talked about 4 groups of criteria: environmental performance, social performance, economic performance, and park management performance. And based on that, we have identified the targets and EIP criteria that will go beyond regulatory framework. And also, to facilitate circularity in industrial parks, it is very important to develop some pilot projects. Those are sizable and those are replicable to other sectors and other parks. While doing that, we were looking into the waste amounts and waste codes from firms, and we were matching them to other firms. Those are operating in different sectors. And it is also important to build circularity out of the borders of industrial park, because in industrial park there could be some waste resources. Those can be used by other sectors. Like in Turkey, it is a general practice that wastewater treatment sludge is used in clinker manufacturing sector as alternative fuel. It's a disposal method, but also something that really boosts the circularity and go beyond the borders and build a synergy between urban and industry. And in Turkey, we advanced the EIP framework, and at the end last week we delivered a webinar and we introduced a guideline to industrial parks to implement eco-industrial park framework at national level voluntarily. And we have also introduced a certification system with some criteria set and target groups. And these were the some success stories from Turkey. And while doing that, I think the most important point, first of all, to understand the firms. Those are resource intensive, and undertake some diagnostics to really identify the circularity potential and resource efficiency potential. And another success factor is stakeholder engagement and the dialogue between public and private groups on this agenda. Thank you, Gökhan.
Excellent. Thank you, Sinem. This example is also very useful because it's still a live program going on, basically its first phase with results, and hopefully it will grow and expand and extrapolate into other areas. In the meantime, we are receiving a fantastic amount of questions from different venues from here and YouTube. I'm going to go back to the latest panelists actually on a couple of these questions. One of the questions I think I would like to go back to the panel is on, I think I see a few groups. One is on new or older initiatives, basically greenfield and brownfield initiatives, and how can we apply the concept in these initiatives effectively. So in that regard, maybe I'll go first to Hannes to ask about, in your industrial park, was this actually designed ex ante, or you identified initiatives that were actually eco-industrial and then applied them? And what do you think about opportunities looking at brownfield and greenfield initiatives? What may be the differences and what would the approaches you take? Question to Marianne is on maybe what are the types of firms that you may need to have? Do you need anchor firms, or do you need anchor institutions like colleges, universities in the ecosystem of these industrial parks, or in the initiatives themselves to make them happen, actually? Those are the first two questions. Hannes first, maybe.
Yeah, and so I think in common is for the greenfield and the brownfield the topic of the strategic approach. I think it's very, very important to define first what kind of eco-industrial park you want to develop, with what kind of societal goal, what kind of industry is supposed to be there, what different resource intensities do you want to have there. And then afterwards, you can define who could be different actors who should collaborate. So the industrial park RIS, for instance, and this industrial park management framework focuses a lot on the need that you need to have energy and you need to have waste. And these are the two profit drivers. So looking for new companies coming on site, you just look for those who have a high need for energy or have a problem with waste management. And then you group potential new companies just around those two needs. If you would have a greenfield approach, you would be much more open. You could say, I would like to have an industrial park as a hotspot, and it could be maybe less on chemical industry, but more on maybe textile industry. And then you would have other parameters to look at and other companies who should work in complementary together. So the core joint aspect is you need to have a strategic approach on how to develop your land, would it be either brownfield or greenfield. I think that's crucial. Understand your business model first and how the circular economy can help in advancing your specific goals and needs in your site.
Thank you, Hannes. I'll go actually first again to Sang-Jun on this topic because we are implementing this framework in a really tedious, systematic fashion. Are there additional thoughts from you, Sang-Jun, in terms of applying in existing and future, and how does that affect the overarching model to expanding the framework to the broader neighborhood as we defined earlier?
Yeah, we already had over 1,300 industrial park in Korea. Before we know about the eco-industrial park concept, so we developed without that very detailed the plan about that the industrial park. So Korean many industrial eco-industrial park business models are most of them is focused on that brownfield the EIP model concept, and so we are very satisfied with that the brownfield model. And but in case of the China, now we are collaborating with the China for that EIP program. But China there is no need for about that the brownfield the EIP model. They need more developing the industrial park to there are lots of the land to develop for that industrial park with that EIP concept, and I mean that green field industrial park. So actually we are committed to the distinguish about that concept between two countries. So for Korean model is the more specified with that Southeast Asian countries more like. So we need to collaborate with that concept with that the countries with things.
Thank you, Sang-Jun. So I'll go to Marianne on the question, back to Marianne on the earlier question again.
Thank you. I think I was asked about the types of firms that would logically go into EIPs. Should there be anchor institutions? And that raises one very important point that needs to be mentioned, and that is that in order to make industrial symbiosis work, you have to have waste. You have to have something to put in the system. And so one of the first lessons that came from our college at MIT was the notion that this is really best with continuous process industries. So there's a reason that you've heard people talk about chemicals today and pharma, and other examples would be of continuous process waste, food processing, energy generation, agriculture. All of these are industries that would target and go well with industrial symbiosis. Things where you're sort of manufacturing components for computers or something like that, there really isn't very much waste in those kind of projects. And so that would be less amenable to a solution from industrial symbiosis. As to whether there is an anchor institution, I think this is very helpful. There are two types of institutions. Sometimes it's the business in the middle of the park that is the most involved with the rest of the companies, and that makes sense. There's sort of anchor tenant model. And so I think that that way, but also we've always found that there needs to be some kind of coordinating entity. And that it can take all different shapes and forms. Remember, these go from the big, large, most industrial companies to foods and farms. And so you will see many different shapes of this, but most important is to have that coordinating body to make sure that the people are talking to one another and finding the best ways to cooperate on common goals.
Thank you, Marianne. Very useful. I'm going to go to Dr. Paban, actually, on a question on his ongoing initiatives here. I think one of the questions we have faced, going beyond basically greenfield and brownfield opportunities and how they apply, was on how to get private sector involved and scale it to the country, Pavan, because you are working on not only on this 13-hectare, 1,000-hectare area, which incorporates different basically zones. You are thinking about expanding this to the country. How are you planning to do that? What are the challenges, and what are your plans and opportunities in involving the private sector?
Actually, as you said earlier, BESA is engaged in developing 100 economic zones. And so far, we have established about 11 private economic zones developed by the private developers. And apart from that, BESA is now currently engaged in developing 28 zones in the public sector and also in the public-private partnership sector model. What we have done is that for the private zones, they are already fully developed. So if you ask me about the scope for developing the model of brownfield initiatives, it is possible there. In Bangladesh, generally, what we see is that Bangladesh has developed a beautiful pharmaceutical industry, exporting to more than 160 countries around the globe. So many of our pharmaceutical industries are actually leasing out their production facilities to manufacture pharmaceutical products on behalf of foreign manufacturers. They are doing it excellently. But for the BESA economic zones, these are being developed as greenfield initiatives. All the investors are coming very new. We had to face huge difficulties because, as I mentioned earlier, in Bangladesh, it is not very easy to take new initiatives, big initiatives in establishing economic zones like as we are doing. We started this process actually in 1957 when Bangladesh was part of East Pakistan, as East Pakistan. And then Bangladesh took the initiative in 1980 for establishing EPZs. But the spillover effects of these two initiatives was very limited to the economy and to the society. That's why Bangladesh government took the initiative in 2010 to establish economic zones. And definitely, we had to overcome many difficulties. It's obstacles not from outside only, it's from within also. And we had to motivate not only people outside the local power structure, also people within the power structure. So it's not a very easy journey for us.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Pavan. This is very useful, and I think it's a challenging initiative going forward to replicate and expand and bring private sector into these different initiatives with strong buy-in. I want to go to one of the things I need to know is we actually have significant interest, and it looks like we need to do more of these sessions on eco-industrial parks. So I'm going to go to maybe Nilgün and Marianne, I think, to talk about the actual experience on whether eco-industrial parks are more innovative than regular industrial parks, and does it help to have an anchor innovator, such as a university, to provide a stimulus, similar to what I had asked earlier to Hannes. Then I'll have a question to the panel on COVID. Nilgün and Marianne, could you basically tell us a little bit about your experience on this? Maybe starting with Nilgün first.
Thank you, Gökhan. Well, indeed, universities, research institutions, or technical support centers which are collaborating or even having nodes in not only eco-industrial parks, but industrial parks, I have personally experienced over many years, are important facilitators of innovation, because they provide a view into a different world. Particularly with universities, you also get access to huge research resources, opportunities for collaborative research, facilities of universities, access to many tools that may not be available in the park or in the company. So clearly, an industrial ecosystem supporting eco-industrial parks is and would be very beneficial for innovation.
I'd like to add that we have not done a study of this scientifically, of whether there's more innovation, and I could imagine ways to do that, but we haven't done that, whether we see more innovation in the EIPs over more traditional organization. I would say that you sense the innovation when you go to these places. And in diversity, there's strength. So if you're really trying to do industrial symbiosis and you're reaching out to companies that you would never ordinarily meet because they're in such different industries, then relationships form. And from these relationships, growth becomes stakeholders. And from stakeholders grow the interest in developing something. So I feel that the chain is there, but it's more informal. It relies on social capital more than it does on economic capital. And I think it's very important to somehow build that into park development.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Marianne, and thank you, Nilgün. The next question we receive, of course, is a very important topic in our hearts and lives now on COVID and impact of COVID on eco-industrial parks, parks in general, and how it is actually impacting basically the framework and implementation. So in there, I want to go back to the panel again, maybe it's also with Marieke too, to talk about what do you think is the impact, because it has an impact on future impact, possibly on the way some of these sectors and global value chains will work. Maybe with reorganization, offshoring, basically regionalization. Have you seen an impact? And what do you think, I would expand this beyond COVID, what do you think are the opportunities for industrial parks to ex ante think about resilience to basically, disasters, to pandemics? What are the types of things that we need to basically think about and plan in looking at this framework? Maybe I'll start with Marieke and then go back to the panel.
So what GIZ was experiencing in Ethiopia was that a lot of people lost their jobs. And what we tried to do is to find a way how we can also, or in that case it was textile industry. So that's why we reached out to the people and still tried to hold them in their jobs that they were producing at home, that we were facilitating also, or that we were trying to find a way how they can continue with their work, and then they were providing a lot of masks, for example. But I think that's on the textile industry. I think my colleagues or the other panelists can demonstrate more examples on that. And now I think we have the huge topic on green recovery or building back better in terms of what we can now do better on the environmental side. And I think for us as international organization, we now have to find a way or show a way how we can facilitate investments in green technologies and a greener development in the green economy. And I think that's a huge possibility we have now due to that corona pandemic. But in terms of resilience, maybe I will leave that question to the others in that panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Mareike. I'll go back to the panel to see whoever wants to come in to talk about COVID, but COVID plus on how it's impacting, how do we anticipate, and look at basically the framework, design, and implementation.
Start, Hannes here?
Please go ahead, Hannes.
Okay, so I think on the first hand, we realized, at least in Germany, that we had problems with the resilience of our value networks, with masks and so on. So rebuilding more locally oriented value networks is a crucial to do afterwards or now as part of the pandemic. Then just regionally, we have got one health center for the whole industrial park, so that all regulation on what and where to do, how to behave, what is social distance and so on, how to make sure that this is respected, all this is centrally administered. And there is as well one medical center on site where all the immediate tests can be done if there is a case. So that's more on the operational side. In terms of building back better, as Marek just mentioned, we're working on the topic, if there will be a climate neutral chemical industry in 2050, what does this mean for the companies in Germany and on site? So we are doing exploratory studies there and events and so on, in just seeing on how this societal goal can be achieved through the next 30 years. And that's something where we are using the pandemic as a basis in order to change how to change value chains for the future.
Thank you, Hannes.
If I could add quickly that one of the ways that COVID has been best known for is the effects on frontline workers. And a good industrial symbiosis program requires kind of a network of secondary processors where you're bringing materials for recycling and repair and so forth. And I would say that those are all going to be very affected by COVID. Think about the recycling material recovery facilities, where people put their hands in and are trying to sort waste and this sort of thing. We are definitely seeing a lot of not only the usual occupational hazards, but also some of the COVID impacts.
Thank you, Marianne. Anybody else that wants to talk about the COVID or resilience issue?
Surely, if you allow me.
Please, go ahead, and then Nilgün.
Thank you, yes. What Beza did is that during pandemic COVID-19 situation, actually our development activities were not stopped at any point of time. That's why in the last financial year, we achieved more than 90% of annual development program implementation. And what we ensured is that following public health safety rules, safeguards, ensured that we established one PCR test lab for the people, and we arranged ambulances, and we took the responsibility of feeding more than 7,500 families. And at our economic zone, there is no report of COVID-related death. Thank you.
we conducted a small informal kind of survey. What we found out was among the different parks and tenants from east to west, what we found out, absolutely they reduced production a lot and were in need of financial assistance and all the kind of support that Paban has been talking about. But in some questions, we asked them, we asked them what they think about the resource-efficient, cleaner production methods that they were using, and how they were going. How do they see these in the future? You know how and the results were quite nice. They were saying, you know, these measures we have been implementing have helped us reduce costs, become better environmentally, and even socially. So the resilience was there. The word resilience was actually, we didn't use it, but they used, the tenants used the word resilience in an abundant way, thinking that being in a park which is more environmentally and socially attuned, and themselves doing, implementing measures about these, they felt more resilient in the face of the pandemic. It also made them more competitive and saved costs. Thank you.
Good. And with that, I think we are about half an hour over our scheduled time, but I am sure we can go probably a couple more hours because the topic is very interesting. But I think we'll probably need to follow up, maybe with more sessions to talk about different subtopics or areas in this arena. I would like to thank all participants first, including basically the participants who joined to listen and ask questions, but also starting with Caroline, Nilgün, Paban, Hannes, Marianne, Sangjun, Dario, all of you for fantastic contributions and really bringing in different perspectives from policy making to implementing to facing all the challenges. Thank you for all your contributions. And I would like to now introduce Etienne Keçiçyan, a good friend and who is basically our senior expert and lead on this topic in the bank group, to basically come in with his closing remarks.
Thank you so much, Gökhan, and thank you for really an excellent moderation of the session. I also want to thank everyone on the panel, and also, of course, UNIDO and GIZ for partnering with us today. It's been a really fantastic partnership, and in the past 7 years, we've seen an incredible development of the EIB space, and I'm very proud of that, to have done that jointly with these colleagues and friends. And also, of course, to Dario and Sinem for organizing and planning the session. It's been a lot of work, and it really shows in terms of the quality that we've achieved today. I just want to touch very quickly on the COVID question, because this is, I think, it's a big challenge today, but also a big opportunity. The resilience, which was never considered much in the terms of planning and development of businesses and operations in industrial parks, is now front and center. I think this will be a trend, and we need to see how we integrate that further into the EIP concept. And of course, in terms of the green recovery, here, as industries are thinking about ways to come back much stronger, and the governments are looking ways to support it, the industrial park as an aggregation becomes an entity where these policies of recovery can be implemented quickly. So the role of that and understanding that is something we need to explore further, because I personally, and also the bank, we don't really know what is happening and how to best respond to this. This is something very new, and we need to be open and frank about that. In terms of just an overview of what I've learned, at least of my key takeaways from this session, and it goes back to Carolyn's remark in making sure that EIPs, no matter what, are economically viable and don't burden the public sector, and that they are beneficial and profitable to the operator. I think these are key things that we need to consider. The EIP framework allows a way for us to see a vision on how to achieve the eco-industrial park objectives. We have seen in the past years an incredible number of increases in industrial parks that are attempting to implement certain elements of the EIP, both bottom up and top down. And with bottom up, I mean industrial symbiosis and other activities at the building stage of the factory shell, for example, and top down when it comes to the use of energy and water and other materials in the industrial park. Another key takeaway for me from what I've heard throughout is collaboration and trust. To me, having worked in the space for the past, 10 years, it is all about building trust with the tenants, building trust with the regulators and the operators of the zone to really enable the eco-industrial park framework to work, coupled with true economics or financial benefits to all the people involved in this transactions. I want to close here. I want to, again, remind everyone that this is, we still have over 100 participants. So I want to remind everyone this is part of a series that we're launching on circular economy and private sector development. We already had a previous session on private sector and competitiveness, circular economy and competitiveness. All the information is online, and we look forward to our next session, which is going to be on circular economy of plastics. So we're very excited to go down this road to understand better how the private sector can be involved in the circular economy, and it gives me really a better understanding of what role the industrial park can play in that equation. And as we can see, it's quite significant. So thank you again for everyone for joining, and hope to see you again in the next session.
Thank you, Etienne. Thank you, everybody, for all the fantastic discussion, and thank you all participants for joining us. Looking forward to see you again in the next event on plastics, but maybe even more of these events on eco-industrial parks, which I think we need. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Take care, everybody. Stay safe and healthy.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye. Thank you, Comedian. Thank you for the support.